Hi, folks. This is Perrin.
Quite started up yet. Gonna give another minute or two. See, we've got Sandra coming in.
Ms. Kelly.
Hello, sir.
Let's see. Steve Robichon.
Yeah, yes, no, there are no signed seats.
He'll be coming. Yeah, no assigned seats, wherever you want to sit. Some of us have a tendency to sit in the same
I think that's it. I was gonna gravitate that way. So
There's no requirement.
But you're closer to the camera.
That's why Mark sits at the back of the table. I need to remember that. Hang out at the back. There's Tim. Hey, Tim. Long
Delaney, how's it
time.
going? Good. Welcome back.
See? Is Lana's coming today too?
I think she's in the field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's first around.
Yeah.
There's
No worries. We got you here too as well, so that's good.
Sandra, this is Sean Sanders. Sean's the new public works director for Pullman. Sandra's on our city council.
Oh, great.
Congratulations. Nice to meet you too.
Let Steve get his sound.
So.
Yes. An extra copy.
Not like.
Steve's here, we can start now.
Okay. Well, let me shut the door so it comes so loud. Well, actually, I'll leave it open for a little bit, maybe shut it in a little bit. Calm it down. If we can get a break in Mark's conversation over yonder.
Who's Rusty?
He said he'd be back. He said he's just gonna be a few minutes behind, but he is coming. All right.
Slam that gavel.
I don't have a gavel. I need a gavel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to get one.
It'd be a really big one.
All right. Are we muted, unmuted?
Yeah, we're streaming live.
Okay.
right now.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. All right, we're ready to get started. Sorry, guys.
I'm sorry.
And it's been eliminated off the state website.
Correct.
All right, well, let's get our Thursday, May 18th PBAC meeting underway. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have folks here virtually and in person. We'll get started with introductions. We'll go around the table here in person, jump over to our guests, and then we'll do virtual. My name is Kara Haley, current PBAC chair, city engineer for the city of Pullman.
Eileen McCall, Pullman City Council, PBAC member.
And Tim Link, professor of hydrology at UI and also PBAC member.
Mark Story, Whitman County Public Works.
Tyler Palmer, City of Moscow Deputy City Supervisor and current PBAC Vice Chair.
Jeff Ledigan, Washington State University. I'm with Facility Services and I manage the utilities on campus.
Sean Wells, City of Pullman, Public Works Director.
Sandra Kelly, Moscow City Council.
Salina Cord, interim executive director for PBAC.
Works for me.
That works for me too.
Yeah.
Robin Nimmer, all the science and engineering.
David Hall, Lake County resident, and SCG member, I think.
Yep.
Haven't had a meeting in a long time, but
Yeah, we'll have to ask Paul on that one, but I think he'll work to set something up soon, so.
Jed Derringer, North Idaho advisor to Idaho Governor Brad Little.
Oh, wonderful. Glad to have you here. Let's jump over. I'm just gonna go to the first person I see, and that's Perrin.
Hi, Perrin Robinson with Jacobs Engineering Group, supporting Alta and their work with PBAC.
All right, Tom.
Yeah, Tom Handy, Whitman County Commissioner.
Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen with the City of Pullman.
Oh, Jody.
Jody Opheim, representing the Board of Whitman County.
All right, awesome. Steve.
Steve Robichon, PBAC Technical Advisor.
Yes, always glad to have Steve here. I see Colt.
Hi, Colt Shelton with JUB Engineers.
All right. Well, anyways, welcome everybody. It's just always good to have folks here. We'll go ahead and, I don't know what I was going to do. Had something in my mind. Paul Kimmel is not going to be here with us today. He's had some important meetings he couldn't get out of. Tom Lamar informed us he was also busy. Michelle, I think, is also out. So it's possible we'll still get a few folks jump in. Rusty is going to be here shortly with University of Idaho. So, but he had a few things to take care of first. We'll go ahead and jump into the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, April 20th. Those were attached to the agenda.
I would move approval of the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes approved. Our next item is public comment for items not on the agenda. Okay, I love it when there's none. I also like it when there is. Today, I'm fine that there's none. Okay, we'll move on to, I guess we don't have any unfinished business and we didn't list anything under new business. And that takes us to our next item, which is presentations and discussion. And we'll start with new committee members. Sean already introduced himself, but new public works director, he's going to be taking the open spot for City of Pullman. So glad to have him here. Do you want to maybe give a little brief introduction for the group? Will you?
Absolutely.
Want, not want, but will you?
Yeah, so I come from the city of Bellevue pretty recently. I was the utilities development review manager there. Managing all of the new development, redevelopment projects in the city of Bellevue, and the associated, what we call the points community, so Hunts Point, Medina, Yarrow Point, the utility department expanded into those jurisdictions for service. Coming to Pullman with 20 plus odd years of public works experience, and hoping to make a difference here too.
Yeah, I told him he gets a few months to get used to PBAC and figure out what all we've been doing, so. It does take a while. The other thing I wanted to discuss on this one is, and actually I'll open it up, Tim, if you kind of want to preface this one, that would be great.
Basically, I sent Tara an email a while ago about actually stepping off of PBAC and having Lana take over as one of the other UI reps. And I think folks probably know Lana's background, but yeah, so she's basically a PhD in atmospheric geophysics. So a ton of good relevant experience as a scientist, and she works for me. And it's part of my plan to get more people who work for me to do things for me. So anyway,
yes, yes, and I think Lana's been a great fit, and we've appreciated all of your efforts and involvement on PBAC. And my understanding is you'll still kind of be on standby for certain things. If requested, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the idea, is to try to tag team a little bit more.
Yep.
I've just gotten really busy, and that's why that's the main reason for just trying to step back a bit. And then the thinking is that if Lana ever moves on, which hopefully she'll stick around, she definitely does have an interest, I think, to stay in the community. So hopefully she'll be here for the long term, but if not, that was one of the things we talked about, is that I would rotate back in if Lana would.
If needed.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
So-
Thanks for all your help too.
Yeah, no, and it was a tough decision because I really enjoyed doing this. It's
Yeah.
fun. So.
We're a hoot.
But
Some
yeah,
might say
I guess I'll
that.
officially would have resigned after the barn party.
Oh, yeah, right.
Pick your moment.
All right. Anyways, yep. I don't think we have any more updates on new committee members. So that's where we're at with that. We'll move on to our first discussion item, which is reviewing the draft 2022 annual report. That was provided in the packet. It is part of our goals and objectives put together each year. Kind of summarize what it is that we've been up to, kind of a status update. Anything else to add on that, Saline?
No, just, I was a little delayed getting it out, so wanted to at least get it in front of you all before we officially put it on the website. It lists out our 2022 accomplishments and then 2023 goals. I realize we're almost halfway through the year already, but that's how it goes sometimes. So it should be a good guidebook, at least for the new executive director.
Yes. Is there any discussion, questions, comments?
I thought it was really good.
Feedback.
I appreciate you putting together, Jamie.
Good, yeah.
I think it's a nice template too for us for the future,
Yeah.
filling in information. She even got the new Pullman logo, I like that too. For any points.
That's good.
Any questions online, comments? Feedback? Okay. We're just zipping through things here today. So our next item is discussing the next steps report, which was also provided in the packet. A little bit of background on that. So Alta wrapped up our let's see, our report back in August of 2022, where we had basically presented 5 alternatives, kind of rated those, tried to establish where we think our next focus, or at least our initial focus should be, let's put it that way. And then kind of coming out of that, we asked her and the Jacobs team, Jacobs is a sub-consultant to Alta, to kind of dial in on alternative 5 and lay out kind of what big picture next steps could be, like what would that process look like. So this memo does attempt to kind of lay out initial next steps. I kind of want to preface and remind folks that in that report, you know, we had left it open as kind of, and the message that we had been sending is we think alternative 5 is the path that we need to head down, collect some additional information, but we also recognize that these other alternatives are still potentially viable, and you know, there's a possibility that we may have to pivot based on factors, you know, there's various factors out there. So this memo, we did specifically ask them to focus on alternative 5. You know, obviously the other alternatives would have maybe a different long-term trajectory. But this does kind of give us a good guide, at least if we were to play the idea of what would alternative 5 look like moving forward, this would be the direction that we would need to head. So I'm going to open it up to Robin and Perrin a little bit more to maybe talk through it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just say something and then I'll hand it over to Perrin. But so the technical subcommittee met last week.
That's Thursday, thank you.
Yeah, so we presented a draft and then we had some discussion, talked about some things, incorporated some comments. And so then the draft, I believe that you have all seen, is the one that it still says draft, but it is like a revised version from what the subcommittee saw.
It is still a draft, yeah. So we're looking for feedback and input. We can rework it as needed, but it is a good discussion starting point.
Right. Thanks. I'm going to let Perrin take it from here.
Coming off of mute, and I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Recognizing you have the memo in front of you already in the packet, but sharing my screen for what it's worth. There might be an opportunity to flip to another file or two here also. But yeah, see, I thought I would just kind of start with describing a little bit about our process. There are some words in here, but I thought maybe a quick description would be helpful here too. And that when we started thinking about coming up, characterizing next steps, recognizing where alternative 5 presently is in terms of its level of development and characterization. You know, we thought, you know, the way it went about this was kind of pulling together a team of folks internally to Jacobs that have worked on projects like this in the past and coming at it from a couple of, you know, from different perspectives, different vantage points. So, and the technical subcommittee folks heard kind of the same thing. So apologies for the redundancy, but wanting to make sure everybody hears this, you know. Yeah, I drew together folks that are water treatment specialists, you know, one of our key modelers, and intakes, you know, specialist, a person that focuses on NEPA-SEPA, environmental permitting, fisheries biologist that has been involved with this project at various times was involved, had a financial analyst, financial planner type person that has been involved with the PBAC process previously, brought him back in. Also involved a person that has a background acting as kind of a city engineer for communities where they're supplementing their staff by looking at outside sources there. So she brought kind of a different lens to it. Anyway, just, you know, and another person or two, but just kind of to give you try to bring together a group that looked at this from lots of different angles. They had a lot of great input. So what we did is we kicked it off, kind of laying out the purpose and need here for this next steps task. And then also I put together a compilation, kind of a catalog of all the historical documents, at least that we're aware of, that folks over the years, different firms, different entities have worked on relative to Palouse Basin, declining aquifer, surface water sources. Anyway, pretty vast body of knowledge out there, previous documentation and studies and things. So I put together that compilation. So when we kick this thing off with that group, shared that tool that was out there so that they could then have a better understanding and appreciation for information that has been collected and gathered and thought about over the years. And then they went off independently and thought through with their own lens what they thought were, next steps with a project like this. And they came back and then we pushed it all together. There were some overlapping and redundant items, which is great. And then we compiled, came back together and talked about kind of prioritization of those, knowing that, there are lots of things, lots of steps that need to get accomplished if this were to become a reality and become functional. But what do we think the first chunk is? And then some prioritization for all the follow-on activities. So that more broad list or more complete list is provided as an attachment to this technical memorandum. So you can see kind of all of those next steps that eventually would need to fall out or be accomplished. Some of which there is a bunch of banding and grouping within them that could have been expanded, but just kind of for the sake of the list, we felt, well, let's push some of them together. And they can be expanded later down the line. But anyway, I mean, you can see we came up with about, I think it was a total of 44 different activities, some of which, like I say, have some elements embedded. And then ultimately, when we came out of that prioritization piece, and we didn't really have a set number going into it that we were trying to target, but it just kind of fell out that 8 seemed to be the right number. And as Robin mentioned, we had this technical subcommittee meeting last week, walk through each of the initial 8, and then really good discussion, and we refined it a little bit. We said one of them, for example, said, that's probably not one that should be on the top 8, and let's replace it with this. And so that was a great process and helped us kind of get it to this level that we're presenting today in this memorandum. So that's kind of how we came about and what we did to get to where we are. I'll just kind of scroll down a little bit here. So for those of you that may have had an opportunity to read through this already, we list out the 8 just kind of in a quick summary fashion here. So I'll read down through these real briefly, but so the first 2 are mostly like kind of PBAC member focused, but we felt it important to at least list these, identify these. It was just kind of in confirming this initial project implementation structure. Who might administer a possible RFQ and be responsible for that contracting? Where would the funding come from to support some of these follow-on tasks where we believe their consultant involvement is happening. So it just seemed like just some dialogue, maybe some documentation around that, so everybody understands and agrees, and there's kind of a general consensus there. So that's really what entails number 1 entails. And we can talk a little bit more about that as needed. And then number 2 kind of gets more, it gets into that funding plan piece, and maybe there's some outside funding sources that PBAC members would like to look to. Lots of different grants out there these days. Idaho Water Resource Board, potential funding there for these activities or later activities. So anyway, it feels like there's just a step, and maybe individual municipalities, county, university funding, PBAC has funds in place. So, but just again, kind of a discussion decision around that piece of it, and then kind of moving out of the more PBAC focused discussions, then we kind of come into some of these, the other 6 that we're feeling like there is outside consultant support with these, and we were hearing that confirmation from the technical subcommittee last week that these next 6 sure feel like having some help would be beneficial. So installing a flow monitoring gauge and data logger on South Fork of the Palouse River. I'll breeze through these and we'll talk a little bit more about them individually here. And then, continuing on, looking into water availability, water rights. Some work has been done previously by others, and Jacob's Alta team jumped in there and did a little bit of this work on the water rights front, but signaling that there's more work that we feel like should be done there. Evaluating water treatment alternatives, kind of on the water treatment process side. and then putting together a high-level conceptual design to help inform what this project may look like. And then a desktop siting evaluation for things like the intake. Where would a water treatment plant want to be located? Then where would for direct connection, where would be that tie-in point, and what would that pipe routing possibly look like? And then number 7, once this initial body of work, take a look back to alternatives 1 through 4 and just do a recheck. Does it still make sense? What are these numbers looking like? What does this project characterization look like? And then probably utilizing some of those same tools that were previously developed that fell into the 2022 report. Just stepping back through that process, and then do another step, do a check. Where are we at? How does alternative 5 look? Where do we go from here? And then lay out kind of again next steps. So those are the 8, and we have some little discussion in here that water quality sampling, certainly a really, really important element as we think about a project like this. We chose not to include a water quality sampling and testing as one of the first steps out of the gate, and the discussion describes it here. There's actually been water quality testing, sampling and testing done in years past, and so we've got some information to leverage. And our folks looking at this felt like, yep, there's some good information out there, giving us a base. So, excuse me, I was on this map here. Here's Moscow and 4 sampling stations or points that were previously evaluated for water quality. So not knowing exactly where this intake may want to be sited, and the treatment plant, maybe it's higher upstream, closer to testing station 1. Maybe it's a little further down, closer to the university, closer to this sampling station number 3. But wherever, after folks have a chance to take a look at it, here's station 1, for example, we've got some good water quality data. Some of the, these are some of the, primary constituents that the treatment process person would look to utilize to then frame up what seems appropriate for that treatment process. Similarly, we have some water quality data down towards Pullman, South Fork of the Palouse. And so we've got this South Fork number 4 sampling location right at the state line. So a little further upstream from where we think the intake would be in treatment plant, by a few miles, but it's in darn pretty close proximity. And again, just flashing up, we've got some good sampling testing data here coming out of that station 4 on the South Fork of the Palouse. So anyway, just wanted to bring that out and kind of shine a light on that. And it's described, but that's why that water quality now is the second next steps. Additional water quality sampling testing, absolutely. Lots of more data is beneficial, and we would certainly promote that additional testing, sampling and testing, but just not this next step. So anyway, that's a little bit on that. A little bit of context for the monitoring station, for the flow monitoring. One reason, we're suggesting that a flow monitoring gauge and data logger be installed on the South Fork of the Palouse River. There is a gauge that USGS has in place and posts data. It's downstream of the confluence with Paradise Creek. And the thinking right now is that any new surface water diversion on South Fork of the Palouse would want to be located upstream of Paradise Creek confluence. So, folks in the past and makes sense, have kind of done some, pluses and minuses to approximate what the flow is in the South Fork of the Palouse River, what it would be upstream of that confluence. But we really feel like installing a gauge upstream and getting actual data would be beneficial to just help that understanding of available water. So, and we do have some gauges on Paradise Creek in that Moscow vicinity. There's one near the university. Again, not knowing exactly where that intake would want to be located because just hasn't just no one's taken a look yet to figure that out. So we're not proposing a new gauge on Paradise Creek until possibly we figure out where a likely intake would want to be located. And then quite possibly, maybe then after taking a look at it, maybe it's far enough upstream that it makes sense, and that would be a proposal, but not at this moment in time, and for those reasons. So yeah, and along with this flow monitoring gauge on the South Fork of the Palouse River, we're proposing or suggesting that a turbidity sensor be included. Again, we've got some historical water quality data to leverage, but installing a turbidity sensor is not much more and could provide some additional data regarding turbidity during the course of the year. So if we're putting in a flow gauge, pretty easy piece then to add one additional piece of data with that turbidity sensor. And as I'm talking, please feel free to stop. And actually, I'll pause to see if there's any questions or comments or anything like that so far before I just keep pushing through.
I have one question. This is Tom. When you were looking at the water quality at that station 1 on the Paradise Creek, have you done comparative studies between all of the gauges or the apparatus or whatever it is on the creek? Just because, downstream of the sewage plant, I would almost expect it to be a little bit different than it is in gauge number 1. And then if there were water diverted from Paradise Creek prior to that, what does that do to the concentration of whatever it is, downstream of the plant at that point, because there wouldn't be enough water, as much dilution water, so to speak. So.
Yeah, so our thinking on this one on Paradise Creek is, we're looking for a spot upstream from the treatment plant. And then the intake person would probably take the first run at taking a look at Paradise Creek in that desktop setting, trying to figure out, where a good intake location is and working in conjunction with the treatment folks. And then kind of, depending on what that evaluation yields, would help inform, which historical sampling station then and data we would use to inform that treatment process evaluation step. So I think, but your point is well taken. I mean, we have to be mindful of where gauges are installed and where historical samples have been collected. So we'd be keeping that in mind as, once we get a little bit further into it and start to have a better idea of where a new intake may want to be sited. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I've got. Does that answer your question or help provide a response?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, you bet. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing is, this is that, each of these is just the first little piece out of the gate and across the starting line here. It's not to suggest that there is a lot of work left. There are a lot of steps beyond and a lot more information, a lot more data. These are just the kind of the first foray to start putting a little bit more definition around what a Paradise Creek project would look like, and also what a South Fork Palouse project would look like. And I'm sure in the end, if both or either were to make their way to full design and implementation, they're probably going to look different than what we first frame up in these first steps. But they are first steps. You've got to start somewhere. So this is what we're proposing in terms of the starting somewhere. Any other questions or comments?
They keep moving on to the next one. Yeah.
You got it. So water availability and rights described, some work has been done previously. I think Steve Robichon, has done work on this in terms of water availability. Others, so this would be to, kind of take another look at what's been done, see if there's some polishing that feels like is appropriate. Maybe there's an opportunity to incorporate some more recent gauge data, but really to get back into that water availability piece, build upon the water rights evaluation work that was done previously by McCormick Associates and former SPF. So we've got a bit of a characterization, understanding what the water rights might look like, but without any water, there's not a project. So, just recognizing this topic is key and paramount to any new surface water project. So this task is focused on, those analyses, evaluations, but also the consultation piece with the agencies, whether it be, state, talking to fisheries agencies, ecology, IDWR. They're having conversations, but again, just more discussion is needed to continue to make sure there aren't red flags, that there's a path forward that is getting framed up, such that if this project were to go forward, then, it would be going forward with a higher degree of confidence. So that's what really this task is focusing on, and even starting to think about, existing water rights. What does that acquisition plan look like? Information generated previously suggests that there aren't enough existing water rights to satisfy the withdrawals that we're talking about here. So new water rights would need to come into play. So what does that process look like, and steps and timing, and so that's what this task entails. I'll pause again. Any questions, comments, or anything? Okay. Well, we've talked about this fifth one a fair amount, or some already, this water treatment alternatives. Just trying to take a look at that water quality data from past and frame up what type of processes are recommended, and then stepping through a conceptual design to help inform this, size of plant, footprint of plant, how much land do we think is going to be needed for a project, and then that would help with this follow-on task with this desktop siting evaluation. Once we kind of get arms around size, also envision for part of this task, this fifth one would be construction cost estimating, and just to get a better characterization of what those costs might look like. So sixth task is this desktop siting evaluation, and all about just getting an early initial look at where we think things may want to be located. Again, definitely not the final say, but on Washington side, there's been, I think, some discussion, maybe a little bit more discussion about where an intake could be sited. And so, but on the Idaho side, I think a little bit less work has been done, maybe some thoughts, but, just needing to dig into that piece a little bit more. But, putting a pin on the map for both. And then also, like I say, where the discharge line from the plant would connect into the existing distribution system.
Yeah, I have a comment on this one, Perrin.
You bet.
I kind of envision under this type of work that, if you got the hydraulic modeling, you'd kind of estimate kind of in each of the systems where you would be connecting into it. But I think it would be valuable to do some basic hydraulic modeling, and the cities, we have a model, right? To see what the limitations might be from the existing system, from what we're proposing, to see if that adds any additional constraint, right? Like, where in the system are we? And it could also tie into that storage, right? Do we need storage? If a flood comes, if all the water comes through in the middle of the night and nobody's using water and we don't have storage for it, well, that's lost, right? So I feel like this ties into, of course, the kind of these three tasks: the flow monitoring, not the flow monitoring, the water availability, the water treatment, and then this desktop siting obviously have some overlap. And I don't know, that's just my thoughts if I'm talking out loud.
I think it's a good call for probably both sides of the border. I think we probably all have hydraulic models that we could share and do at least a quick.
Or just like, hey, we think it's going to be this much water at this timing, or this, whatever it is, hydrograph. I don't know if that really applies in this case, but yeah. How does our system respond to that? And does it, does it deliver where we need it to, or are we limited by not being able to get the
Or do you
water
need
way
a
over
transport
there,
pipe
right?
across town to make it
Yeah,
work?
so I think that that's gonna limit potentially how much you can use from this alternative. And it would apply for any of the other alternatives as well at some point, but it's important to get a little bit, to have a better understanding of that.
Well, I think you're right, Kara, just because the storage component could really influence cost in a pretty significant way if that's something that does become necessary in order to make it feasible. So it'd be good to understand that better.
Yep.
Perrin, I did want to add too on item 4.5 on the treatment, not just construction costs, but O&M cost is a big piece of that too, that we need to keep an eye on.
You're absolutely right. Yep, that is a good point. And that would be part of it. Hopefully I put O&M in the text, but if I haven't, that is the intent also.
Yeah.
Let's make a little note of that here. Yes, no, all good discussion for sure. Agreeing with everything you guys are saying. And, you know, on that 4.6 desktop siting evaluation piece here, I do have some words in there acknowledging this hydraulic modeling component for that existing city distribution system on both sides. Yes, so recognize that is some important information to understand also.
Yeah.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay. All right, so yeah, the 7th task, I mentioned it before, not a lot more to say on this one. You know, just again, it was discussed last week that this reevaluation of alternative 5 compared to 1 through 4 would be a good thing. Just to take another look to say, how's it stacking up now? Knowing that, you know, those other alternatives are still very viable. And so that is kind of what this 7th task entails, you know, leveraging most likely that work that was done for the 2022 report. It's got some good criteria, weighting and scoring that was done previously. So probably following that same path and approach there. So that's kind of the vision. But then, you know, reevaluating and taking a look, you know, how does alternative 5, how do we think it stacks up now that we've got a little bit more information, a little more characterization on alternative 5. Yeah, and then again, the 8th task, you know, we talked about that then, okay, now that we've done some more work and you have a better understanding, where do we want to go from here? I mean, maybe let's continue on with alternative 5. It's looking very viable and you know, initial preferred alternative. Let's continue on, or maybe it is a pivot as Kara suggested there. So that would just be that opportunity to figure out where to go next. And, you know, depending on that, what would be that next body of work to try to accomplish. Yeah. So kind of scrolling on down here, we've got this table 1 where there's a little summarization. There's text in each of the write-ups signaling at least who we think are, you know, suggest, you know, might be leading and might be supporting, and kind of those roles amongst PBAC members, entities, and then a consultant. So you can see that table leads, you know, these first 2 tasks as we talked about, PBAC and others kind of in lead roles, maybe consultant is supporting to some degree, or maybe not. We had some good discussion last week, and I think we're kind of bouncing around of hearing some commentary about, well, no, I think we can figure it, you know, this is on us. We can figure this out, or no, maybe it would be beneficial to have some consultant support to just help drive those conversations. So that's what the TBD over here in this consultant budget is indicating. Could be none, or could be some. Flow monitoring gauge, got some dashes over here. We're feeling like this would be an outside entity. And Robin, you've done a little bit more homework on this one. Would you like to just share a few words?
So I have a message in the USGS, but I did talk to someone from ecology. And so he was able to give me a cost estimate and a time frame. And the time frame is a little surprising, but everything takes a long time, basically. So this is not something that it'll be quick, in next year, like, hey, we've got funding, we can do this. And if we want funding from ecology, from that pot of money from the guy that I talked with, it would take, you have to go by their fiscal year and when you're gonna get your permission, your request in and things like that. So the good news is I have some information.
If PBAC were to fund it, could that process be expedited? Would they still be willing to do it, or are we on our own? Can you even do that on your own?
I think so. I mean, like we do, we do gauge data and things like that. It's just, they have a specific way they do it, and then they upload, the data are automatically uploaded to a website that you can just see real time. I think it's every 15 minutes. It sounds like there's a stream, like if you disturb the stream, you have to get a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, and that can take a year. So I suspect if USGS does it or ecology does it, it's the same. I don't know if like a consultant could do it, or the university, if they still have to get that same permit or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you have to get, I know in Washington, we're working these tiny streams, and we have to get hydraulics permits because we've.
Hydraulics
stuff,
permit.
so doesn't take much to get a permit.
Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. So, this memo is still sitting in draft form, which is why you're seeing these dollar signs with X's and highlights and such. Definitely wanted to have the meeting today, the discussion today, see how you all are feeling about this list, and getting feedback and any inputs you have there. And we kept them with X's, knowing that maybe there are some other thoughts and requested revisions or changes. So if these do seem, after we talk about it some more, and these seem right and appropriate, then the intent would be Alta and Jacobs would work on putting together some budgetary numbers, just to give you guys an idea of what to anticipate. It's not to suggest that these are the numbers that a consultant would, the exact dollar amount, but it's to give an idea of where the dollars could be. And with each of these, I mean, as you can imagine, consultants can do more or less depending on the funding available. Everything can be kind of tailored and right sized there. So we'll put numbers on it. But like I said, I didn't want to suggest that, these are exactly what you're going to see. It could, it could range a little, come in a little less, could come in higher if there's more available funding, and try to take these a little bit further. So anyway, just that's what's going on there. And kind of, I don't know that we'll have an opportunity to be back before PBAC members here before we turn this final. So just to share a few words. So when there's some numbers over there, maybe to provide a little bit of context for the thinking around how we're putting numbers out there.
Sure.
I have a quick question. Do the universities have their own water rights?
Yes.
Yep.
So wouldn't they want to be involved in number 4?
I think probably 4 through 6 in some capacity.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of depends on who ends up owning this thing.
Project, yeah.
But also,
yeah, it's a
like
good
if we
point.
pulled from the South Fork and we're on the southeast side of town, there's potential to also get some of that water to WSU. I mean, I don't know, I would
It kind of
think,
ties into that whole governance discussion about who's going to own and operate this, how are we going to team up together as a couple different jurisdictions, and what's the framework there? What's the rate structure? There's a lot of questions. And who's going to hold on to the water rights? Yeah.
Would it be fair to 4 through 6 move that from an NA to under the university county role to a support role, or a different, or maybe
the county should be separated out from that, because the county
that's probably
doesn't
true.
really have any water rights. I mean, we would like everybody to get what they want, but
we can certainly add, differentiate between the university and counties. Yeah.
So maybe
Advisories for the county.
advisory, I like that word choice.
If we put it, that is a good term. If we put advisory for this kind of shared column for 4, 5, and 6, would that feel comfortable?
I'd be okay with
Yeah,
that, but
yeah.
I'd open it to the universities and the counties.
That seems to be more accurate to the role that they'll play rather than not applicable. I just, everything we do ends up being a public facing document, and I wouldn't want there to be a perception that they're not somehow involved in that. So I think that probably messages better what their role would be.
Probably for all of these NA ones under university and county.
I would think so.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's do that.
Eliminate
And
it.
just to add into that from the university standpoint, here at ULI, our water is managed by a sub-operator, a private entity. So we have to, they would
Need to
want
be
to be involved
involved.
at the table from that standpoint. Because they have, when we talk about any dealings with our water, either infrastructure or anything, they have the sole rights to our water from that
Yeah.
standpoint.
And I think that's an interesting comment also. Obviously, as we work through some of these or decide what it is that we want to do next, even from a city standpoint, there'd be other staff from the city that, I would have to get involvement with to potentially hash through some of these things, right? I think to me, I picture this still as all of this as a, we have the original study, we have all this planning data in it, which is good data, which says this is a feasible alternative to move forward with. It's been on the plate for quite some time. We spent a lot of effort to say it's still there. Let's dive a little bit closer into it and make sure that those data gaps are filled, see where that takes us. So I think that the step 4.7 is really important to keep in mind with all of this, that we're not saying this is the alternative that we're doing, but we're going down this path a little bit further to refine that planning to something with a little bit more meat and detail, and then we revisit. Because maybe Jeff, you said it, somebody said it, maybe we find we need a really significant amount of storage and that's no longer feasible, or that ups the cost from what we were assuming when we came to the conclusion that alternative 5 was the way we wanted to go. So I think it's just important for everybody in this room to remember that when we're talking about this, and however it is that we decide our next steps are, that, we still don't know that this is the alternative. That makes sense to everybody?
Yep.
It's still fluid.
Still fluid. But I do think these are the main things that you need to start working through to get to the bottom of that a little more. The problem is we've talked a lot about all these and they've been very big picture. We have to dive in a little more. Other feedback, comments, questions for Perrin and Robin?
Really appreciate you guys' work on this. Thank you.
Amazing stuff.
I think it would be interesting. So I think the next steps on this, Robin, is the Jacobs will generally need to wrap up the memo and then the budget items by the end of this
Our
month.
contract ends May 31st, so.
Okay, so we would get something like that. I would kind of put out there, and Paul's not here today, but he had some feedback too, and I think it's solid feedback. That it might be worth an offsite workshop or something for us to talk through all of this in greater detail. Kind of decide, I guess it would be kind of that, maybe the steps 1 and 2, do that in more of a workshop setting where we can just dialogue, brainstorm, kind of come at what it is that we want to do with this, and just make sure that we're doing it really thoughtfully and everyone's on board.
I agree. I think we're at a junction point with this information, and I think having some dedicated time to discuss what the next steps look like so that we can be really efficient with those would be beneficial.
Yeah, and what level we want to do that. I think these are laid out really nice, and there's probably some aspects of these that you could get away with less and some with more. So I think we'll probably need to have the whole committee engaged through a lot of these processes just to make sure that we're figuring out how we're going to fund things and also funding things wisely, I guess, is the way I would put that. So I don't know what that would look like in terms, we have some other updates on executive director hiring progress, but hopefully we get this finalized, and then maybe in the next few months we can look at scheduling something to start to hash through that and then get some more momentum on this. So probably won't be overnight. We gotta get a new executive director on board and get them caught up to date, but I don't want this to sit too long. I think it would be important for us to continue hashing out what this might look like.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really like this prioritization of this.
Yeah.
Steps. I'd never seen a chart quite like that, and I thought it was really very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is interesting just to kind of show where, we're talking about the first 7 steps. It's a very long list after that, right? So it's just a reminder as to what stage we're at in it. But it's all very important pieces and things to work through. And, we asked Jacobs and Alta to do this specific to alternative 5 because that was what we've selected, and we also had minimal budget, but you could do a similar process with the other alternatives down the line. I think some of them would be similar with slight modifications, but anyways, yeah, I like it as well. Other feedback, questions, comments? Do you have the information that you need, Perrin, to wrap things up?
I do. Yes. Yeah. Again, good discussion here. Yeah, much appreciated. Making these changes to this table 1 in terms of the advisory role, and then I'll try to make sure that the text above reflects that as well. So yeah, great feedback, and appreciate that conversation about those dollars that will land in this table. And it's true that you guys could scale up, scale down, more or less work. So yeah, I just didn't want to suggest that these are the final numbers.
We won't hold you to that, Perrin, but
Exactly.
It will be helpful for us, like you said, just so we have a feel for what we can generally anticipate with knowing there's some ranges there.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad this was well received, and it sounds like helpful. So that was our target. That was the goal. So I'm glad it sounds like we got there.
Thanks, Perrin.
Thank you, Perrin.
You bet. Thank you. I'll go ahead and log off and let you guys continue.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, in that case, we'll move on to our subcommittee reports. Our first one is our transition subcommittee. And I'm actually going to put Rusty on. Where'd Rusty go? He's not here. Never mind. I'm not going to put Rusty on the spot.
He's chickening now.
I know he's a busy guy today. I can give a brief update. So myself, Rusty, Mark, Tyler, and Paul have been a part of the transition subcommittee. I'm trying to think where we left last. We have had 2 rounds of interviews.
We had our second round of interviews on Tuesday and had a meeting today to discuss that further.
Yes.
And
yes.
yeah, so as a transition, as a subcommittee, what we've determined is that we've narrowed it down to 2 lead candidates. We're going to invite them back. We're targeting June 1st, which is a Thursday, to have interviews that day. A third interview, more of a casual conversation about areas that we would like to vet out of the committee. And then we will have, like we have in the past, a reception for all PBAC members and whomever else might want to attend, a social, so that we can get feedback from the committee and just kind of see how they interact interpersonally with everyone. And so the idea that we've got is that we would have those interviews that day, and the individual that we're not interviewing while the other party's being interviewed, we'd ask Celine to take them around, have a conversation with them, kind of show them where the office is, have them get a feel for what that looks like. And then we would have the social, so everyone get a chance to have some exposure and then move forward, hopefully with a recommendation.
I would just add to that, once again, we're fortunate to have some very good candidates to be looking at.
Yeah.
That's a blessing and a curse. It's hard to decide, but we have good qualified people to choose from.
Yeah, I feel confident we have good options. So we'll, because that's just a couple of weeks away, what we're tentatively planning for, that was something we came up with. We obviously need to make sure that dates and things are going to work, and we'll send something out to the whole group about a reception time and place as soon as we have that information. Hopefully it can work for as many people as possible. In an effort to keep things moving forward, though, we kind of it's hard to get everybody in this room to have the same schedule. So we're going to prioritize the transition subcommittee members for that day and then open it up and really hope that we get some involvement and engagement. But we'll get you guys information as soon as we have it on a date and time and so forth. So there's good news there. More to follow. We'll have more information at the next meeting and hopefully sooner than that. Budget subcommittee. Can I pass that to you, Saline?
Sure
I think
can.
you're gonna be
No,
best for
pass
that.
it to Rusty.
Call on silent
Budget chair.
Rusty again.
In your packet was the monthly budget update. I don't know if we really had that many expenditures, maybe also with the Genesee well chip work that they're working on.
Yeah.
And compensation. So, pretty standard there. We wanted to check in with an update for members for the future contribution increases that we've been talking about the last couple months. Just see if there's any updates from anybody, if you've had conversations with leadership and whatnot.
I know we don't have any Latah County representatives here. I know Paul said that he has submitted an official funding request to the board at the higher proposed assessment rate. So he's made progress on that. Pullman's status hasn't really changed from before. It should be in good shape, especially if we can get U of I's contributions back on track. Any other updates?
Don't really have one from Whitman County. We haven't formally taken it to the board, but Tom might have a word on it.
Yeah, we will be good with it.
And I appreciate we're really out in front of it, I think, which is really helpful. It allows all the entities to budget and plan accordingly. So.
The WC didn't have any big issues. It was just more of a matter of having a plan together.
Yeah, so as a reminder, it was not for this year, but for next budget year that we're asking the entities to.
Correct.
Yeah.
So sometime when we get a new executive director on board, we'll draft up kind of a PBAC resolution around what that would look like. Then that could be shared with the different entities.
Yep.
I know we'll take ours to council, probably a similar process for Moscow and the universities, however they need to do that.
I just darkened someone's doorway until they.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, as far as, yeah, and as far as the plan goes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, either signature or.
And the
brains
counties
will be
as
on a
well.
piece of paper, yeah.
It's seeming promising at least. So I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, we don't have any entities, I don't think, that are, and you know, the university is, I suspect that we should have some resolution really shortly there as well. So
Yeah,
not what
it's been
bonds we had there,
slow,
but
but-
just that they had what they needed and looked positive, so.
Yeah, with potential for payback for
Yeah.
the last few years that haven't had.
Which would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's not really an update on that U of I commitment, but I think we're getting close.
I'll send it
Now that
later this
Rusty's
week.
gone.
Yeah,
Well, sorry, we talk about U of I payment.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, like Brian Foisey right now, as you guys have seen, the most recent University of
Yeah.
Phoenix thing come out,
Mhm.
that has been his
Focus.
life for
You
the
think that
last.
500 million is trumping our?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta say that. I've
Sliver that.
yeah,
I've been trying to catch up his vapor trail for about a month, and
That's been the
that
focus.
is 100% been his focus, and so
Yeah, the last correspondence we had with him was positive and said
Yeah,
he
yeah.
had everything he needs, so I suspect we're in good shape.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And so I will, I've got another opportunity we have an executive meeting Thursday of next week. And I'll add that as a topic, agenda topic,
That would be great.
because actually, Tim, I wanted to check with you too. I'm sorry if I'm deviating here too far, is how do we want to get this to the people who want to know? And because I think on your end, I think some important folks that want to see this that haven't really, we want to involve are like the Brad Ritz, Krista Mora. Tyler, I don't know if you want to like
Annual
maybe
report.
get a time to where maybe you could actually come to one of our XCOM meetings and you talk about
I'd be happy.
the annual report, so that part of the leadership feels informed.
Mhm.
I just want to put some things in motion where people
Yeah.
Start to
great.
feel better
they're-
informed.
Yeah,
I think that's a really good idea, Rusty.
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah, if you want, I'm happy to pop by and we can have that conversation.
perfect. I'll see if we can get you in next week. The meeting's usually Thursdays at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I'll next week, send it my way.
I will.
I'll be getting back from DC on Wednesday, but I can maybe make that work.
And I know last fall, saline, we did our road show. I think that ought to be something we continue.
My thought with the annual report is to at least send it out to all of you in a final form and say,
Pass it
quickly
on
share with
as
your
needed.
leadership at minimum, and then if we need
So
to.
that's one thing I felt like we heard was, hey, what's
We need
going
more
on?
check-ins.
More check-
Yep.
And I just, this is
More frequent touches.
This is great. Yeah, I just want to get it in front of them so they can
Yeah, it's great.
formulate any questions they might have.
Yep.
So I think this is something like on the research side, you could bring into that fold if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, good call.
The last item on the budget subcommittee reports is just the drafting of the FY 24 budget. Trying to get a meeting scheduled in the next couple weeks just to formalize a budget of some sort, to give the new executive director something to go off of.
I did fill out the doodle.
I know, I'm only waiting on Jason, I think. So
It's
if you wanna
only
talk-
like 1 or 2 days that we're looking.
We actually had like 4 or 5, because we only need a half an hour, I think. I don't think we need a full hour.
You send out the most complete doodle polls I've ever read.
I mean, I have to like,
You're the last one, you just look at the ones that have 3 or 4 and you just go.
Folks, there's 120 much.
because I have to do it, if I do it by an hour, then I could lose you guys. If I do it
That's
by
true.
half hour, I
He's
get
right.
more.
You get that over.
And then I have to do it in 2-week increments because
The trick is
I have
to
learned
be the
well.
last.
I have to set aside some time for the doodle.
You're like, oh, no, I'm not
Schedule
doing
half an hour slot poll.
We are hard to schedule though.
I tried it once and it crashed on me because I was on myself.
That's
The
painful.
next day.
Do it again. Get up the courage to come back and try it again.
If there was an easier way,
It's a hard.
please let me know.
It's okay.
Things that work.
I just had to say something.
All right. Communications subcommittee.
Paul put out a press release for the Woods Hole.
Yep.
Visit. Past that, I don't think.
I know
We're
the
just waiting on the
Daily
new.
News had inquired too about reaching out to them. And
Yeah,
I'm
they
not sure.
Did, and I've
Never
never
saw
seen
anything on it,
I
but-
never had any follow-up for what they reached out to me with, so.
Technical subcommittee was involved with this effort, so no real new updates on that one. And again, I think a workshop with the greater group to hash through our next steps is going to be key. If there's something the technical subcommittee needs to do in advance of that, we can brainstorm that.
Yep.
Questions, comments on subcommittee reports before we move on to other reports and announcements? All right, next we have agency updates. We had listed the item here. There was some talk now quite some time ago.
Yeah.
I think Tyler, you might be best
Yeah, Cole,
suited to respond.
Cole, I
here.
think maybe this is something that, what we were hoping was just for an update on the IDWR, the drilling of the well. There was gonna be a monitoring well that we had, and then there've been several delays due to funding, lack of contractor availability. So we're just hoping to get an update on where that might stand.
And we can bring this back at the next meeting too.
Yeah.
See if it gains traction.
Not a,
Yeah.
Colt, are you there?
For what, for the IDWR well?
yeah, the monitoring well. We're just wondering if there was a status update on that.
I don't have one.
Okay.
No,
Well,
no worries. And maybe I can
can
make a
send
note,
out
we
an
can
email.
inquire specifically about that for the next meeting. Okay. Our next one, I do have recap, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. I know Paul had done some groundwork to get access to some of the private wells. I know he was out there for some of them.
Yeah, we took a few pictures. Anybody else have interactions with them?
Which one, I'm sorry?
The
Woods Hole.
My staff did. but-
Yeah.
Me too.
I talked to a local farmer, he says, yeah, they're out there poking around.
That sounds about right.
He didn't seem hostile about it, so.
I can do this or make a note, maybe we
Write it
can
up,
check
write
in
it
with
up.
them and just email
Alan.
Alan and just
Rebecca.
say, hey, how'd it go? I know the intent is, I think they said even a month or so after that there might be some initial something. So that might be
Yeah.
something to consider. Coming back sometime this summer or I didn't get too much recap as well,
Yeah.
although it wasn't too long ago, so they're
My
probably
staff
just.
said it was kind of interesting and fun.
Yeah, I know they had a lot of coordination to meet the right people at the right time, but as far as I knew, it went smoothly.
I think they got access to all of them except for one, because the private owner didn't want to give them access anymore, so.
So hopefully that'll be beneficial for their study,
Yeah.
and I'll be interested to see what they share back.
Yeah.
Okay, civic planning grant, just I'm gonna pass this off to Tim, but it was maybe a year and a half ago, it was quite some time ago that we had brought this up with the committee, and PBAC had kind of written a letter of support for that grant. And I'm gonna let Tim give an update.
Okay, yeah, I'll give a quick rundown. As Kara mentioned, we submitted a proposal to the NSF Civic program, and they have all these different programs with different funding objectives and timeframes and all this kind of stuff. Civic stands for Civic Innovation Challenge, and one of their key things is to try to fund projects that build resilience to natural disasters, one of which could be running out of water. Anyway, so what was proposed was to actually do a planning grant, which would then lead to a full proposal. And the main idea was to develop some sort of a resiliency atlas for the Palouse, which seems a little vague, and unfortunately seems to be vague to the reviewers as well, and that's the thing that dinged on. So anyway, it did not get accepted, which is really typical for NSF. We typically don't expect acceptance in the first round, usually hope for positive comments, and then resubmit it in the second or third round to get funded. Comments were actually quite positive. It was ranked competitive, but you have to be really high up in the tier to win these things. Anyway, so that's the gist of it. It's being led essentially by a group out of the College of Art and Architecture, with components from social sciences, and then myself on the technical side from CMAR. So it's more of a sort of a landscape architecture, community design, social sciences grant. And the next civic round is in 2 years, so it'd be, I think, fall of 2024. What we're looking at now is that there's a lot of faculty interest in basically taking our comments that we received, spinning this into a new program, which is called Smart and Connected Communities, that has similar objectives. They're basically for sustainability oriented projects. With a strong community engagement component. And that is one of the things that we scored super high on in terms of the civic responses or the reviewer comments, were that the really tight integration with the community groups. So yeah, so we see PBAC as a really key entity to help move this forward and have it really be a mutual benefit kind of thing. So that's where we are. Right now, the plan is that we'll probably do a submission in late fall of 2023, and then perhaps pursue a civic grant again in 2024.
Great.
Where we are.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, and so I volunteered to be the liaison between that group and this group, and so.
Yeah, and just, we can have brief updates like this and see what's needed of feedback and have discussions accordingly.
And the nice thing about this other program is they do fund projects that are for 2 or 3 years, where the civic was one where essentially if you got your planning grant funded and then got the full grant funded, the full grant would provide something like $1 million or $1.5 million that you needed to spend out in a year.
Oh, that's pretty tight.
Yeah, that's really hard because you have to recruit people, train them up, and then poof, you're done.
Yeah.
It's easy to get a 1-year extension with NSF. So when we see 1 year, we really think 2 years.
Yeah, okay,
So
makes sense.
that's still a tight time.
But this other one is longer potentially.
Exactly.
Longer timeframe.
They fall more into the classics or 3-year timeframe, which is much more feasible to work with. But similar dollar amounts, they're in, I want to say the sort of 1 million to maybe 2.5. So they're sizable. Perhaps.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Tim. Questions for Tim on this? Comments? And I'm going to step back in the agenda. I realized I jumped past agency updates. If there are any other agency updates, we talked about this kind of at the last meeting, opening it up for any comments for the greater good, things that might be going on at the different agencies that are worth noting to everybody. So I'm going to step back to agenda item 8A and see if there's anything that anyone wants to share. And it's okay if there's not.
Well, we're still fielding comments about our new water ordinance.
Yeah, both Moscow and Pullman's irrigation season started today. Yes. And still, obviously, we've had some warmer weather, but still ask people to be wise about when they start up their irrigation systems. Certainly warranted in some areas, full sun, and other areas maybe don't need it yet. So being conscious about it. Kristen's on the call. Kristen's been fielding lots of great calls for the city of
Yeah.
Pullman. Because it is a new process for us. And again, want to thank Moscow for their help. And they've been great resources too for us in this first season. Because they've had some of these and exemptions and lots of things we've been working through. But still very positive. So,
I have a question.
yeah.
Is Pullman gonna announce, you know, on a fairly frequent basis, at least right at first, how much water was saved with the program?
We're going to have to track it. It's a little hard, you know, Steve could probably vouch for this on a year-to-year basis because it's going to depend, you know, last year was very wet and cool all the way through June. This year seems to be trending to be a warmer year. So I think we're certainly willing to share the data that we have, and you guys will get all of our pumping information. I think we're going to need a little bit of time to really evaluate that confidently and be able to report numbers, but certainly we'll be tracking it and trying to report back on that accordingly. But it's not going to be an overnight thing because you're going to have differences in weather and temperatures, and you kind of need a 3-year average, right, Steve? At least 5-year average, according to Steve. But we're going to definitely be tracking that as best as we can. But I don't want to promise it's going to be an overnight. We're going to know exactly what we saved. But I am optimistic we'll see positive trends.
And Tom, we've got, you know, Moscow passed the ordinance
quite a few years ago,
a couple decades ago, and so we've got some history there that there's a percentage drop that we can attribute to having an irrigation season, and then in our system, it's about 1 million gallons per day on average that we save for each day that we truncate irrigation season. So whether that be starting later or ending earlier, it's about 1 million gallons a day in our system. So
because you can look at when the irrigation season kicked in.
Yeah, we can look at where it kicks in and off. And so I suspect Pullman will probably be a little bit north of 1 million per day just because it's a bigger system.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. It's helpful. So certainly ask us next year or maybe the end of the irrigation season, but I'll be eager to look at the data. Anything else agency updates wise? Okay. We get to move on to a little precursor for our next PBAC meeting, which will be June 15th, 2 p.m. I think that's actually fairly early in the month for being the third Thursday of the month, but I think it actually works out well for me because I'm going on vacation at the end of June. So on that agenda, we've got actually quite a few items that I would say are relatively important. So just want to draw everybody's attention to it. We have elections really for, you know, chair, vice chair. I think we'll reconfirm our subcommittee representatives at that.
Well,
or committee as a whole.
We all just want to make sure we all are, you know,
no new updates.
Who our committee members are, just for voting purposes. This is kind of like an annual kind of meeting that we need to have. So reconfirm committee representatives just for PBAC, and then reconfirm assignments for the subcommittees. We'll adopt the FY24 budget after the budget subcommittee meets in a couple weeks, and then we'll approve the annual assessments that will go out starting in July.
Which were generally what will be proposed will be what they are now. Presently.
Yep, that's right. But we'll still need to
formally. Other than that, I have a pitch for Paul. It's the Blue Space and Barn Party Saturday, 5:30 to 9:30. I think he said the band was going to start playing at 7. Food, drinks. If you haven't RSVP, I'm sure he'd say if you don't RSVP and you want to come, still show up. So anyways, should be a good time. So I'm pitching that, and it went out via email as well. So,
and I think it's gonna be hot Saturday. So his spread has a lot of shade, so it should be actually an enjoyable area to hang out in the heat.
Yeah. So. All right. Well, I don't have any other announcements. I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thanks, everyone.